Liberty City had always been a breeding ground for power, a place where greed ruled and empires were built on blood. From that chaos rose a Colombian Cartel, a syndicate formed in the aftermath of Colombia's brutal drug wars. They brought their operation north, flooding the city with spank and seizing control through fear, precision, and violence. For a time, their dominance seemed unshakable, and their reach was untouchable. But in a city where power never stays in place for long, even the strongest empires eventually begin to crack, and the cartel was no exception. What's going on, everybody? You're not officially kicking it with RJ. I want you guys to kick up this week, kick off and shoes, get something to eat, get something to drink. Today, I'm going to be discussing the Colombian Cartel in Liberty City, what happened to them, how did they end up where they were, and really who they were. And before we really get into it, I want you guys to smash the like button, smash the subscribe button. It really helps the algorithm. Anyways, let's get right into it. The exact origins of the Colombian Cartel in Liberty City aren't really ever explained, but their presence in the city ties heavily to real-world events. In 1993, Pablo Escobar was assassinated in a police operation, thus ending the Medellin Cartel. And 2 years later, the Medellin Cartel's successor, the Cali Cartel, fell in 1995 due to the arrest and deaths of their leaders, marking the collapse of Colombia's major cartels. As the Colombian drug war raged through the late 1990s, crime organizations began spreading beyond their homeland, setting up operations across Latin America, the United States, and Europe. So Liberty City's Colombian Cartel could have been tied to the Medellin or even the Cali cartels. Anyway, sometime between 1993 and 1997, the Colombian Cartel began shifting its operations north, embedding itself deep within Liberty City. By 1998, they were already well established, well armed, and well funded, ready to dominate the city's underworld. Their empire revolved around Spank, a new synthetic drug distributed through Liberty City streets, airports, and harbors, all fronts for their smuggling network. As the cartel expanded, it began forming covert business alliances with seemingly legitimate corporations. Chief among them was the Pan-Atlantic Construction Company, a corporate front with deep ties to the Colombian Cartel's cocaine imports. Now, it is possible that the Colombian Cartel is somehow related to the Diaz Cartel, or even the Mendes Cartel from the mid-1980s in Vice City, as they share a few similarities. Now, they both were once prominent drug syndicates before being toppled, they both originate from Colombia, and they both serve as antagonists. Now, in 1998, some cartel members can even be heard saying that they used to own a mansion in Vice City.
I had a mansion in Vice City.
Suggesting a shared lineage. This can mean either one of two things. They were part of the Diaz Cartel on Starfish Island, or part of the Mendes Cartel on Prawn Island. This implies that the Liberty City's Colombian Cartel may have been formed from surviving elements of the Diaz or Mendes Cartel, expanding north after the then Diaz Cartel or the Vercetti gang took over. It's likely that many former Diaz or even Mendes Cartel members either moved to Liberty City to join the Colombian Cartel. Before Catalina even set foot in Liberty City, the cartel was run by a man named Cisco, a powerful and pragmatic leader operating out of the city by the late 1990s. Under his control, the gang clashed with the Uptown Yardies over smuggling routes and territory. By 1998, the cartel had established itself as one of the city's most dangerous factions, clashing frequently with other criminal powers. In one instance, when Salvatore Leone sent Tony Cipriani to oversee a drug shipment at the Portland Harbor, the supposed business partners turned out to be none other than the Colombian cartel dealers, led by a man named Miguel. The deal quickly went south when the LCPD and FBI ambushed the docks. Believing he had been betrayed, Tony then guns down the cartel man in a chaotic shootout. Despite the attack, Miguel somehow survives this, continuing to serve as a senior member within the cartel. His survival and experience made him invaluable, and his connections only deepened as the cartel expanded its operations throughout the city. The Colombian cartel's biggest front was the Pan-Atlantic Construction Company, where cartel soldiers were often seen guarding construction sites and escorting high-profile figures. One of these high-profile figures was Avery Carrington himself, a wealthy developer and Donald Lowe's former mentor. Arrived in Liberty City, he was escorted by heavily armed cartel men. His assassination by Tony Cipriani not only crippled Donald Lowe's rival, but also disrupted one of the cartel's most significant construction partnerships. Having Pan-Atlantic as their front with the bombing of Fort Staunton that was once a stronghold for the Forellis, the cartel presence grew in Fort Staunton. Cartel owned Pan-Atlantic's redevelopment project there, built directly over old Forelli turf, then became a haven for cartel operations. Cisco's death in 2000 at the hands of his own associate Vinny leaves the organization leaderless. The Colombian cartel likely descends into chaos. Without a clear leader, every major lieutenant wants control, a power vacuum filled with ambition and distrust. At the center stood Miguel, one of the cartel's most respected figures. He had the experience, loyalty, and connections, making him the natural frontrunner to take over. But his focus on stability made him vulnerable to someone far more cunning. Now at this point, Catalina then arrives in Liberty City. In the early 2000s, between Cisco's death and the early months of 2001, she began seeing Miguel, exploiting his influence to gain access to the cartel's inner circle. Much like she had in San Andreas, she uses personal relationships as stepping stones to power. Through manipulation, charm, and calculated ruthlessness, Catalina likely learns and takes note of the cartel's structure. While likely eliminating rivals quietly and building her own base of influence, Miguel thought she was helping him stabilize the organization, but in reality, she was taking it for herself. By the time anyone realized it, Catalina wasn't just part of the cartel, she was already running it from the shadows. The infamous Bank of Liberty heist in the beginning of 2001 marks the beginning of the end for the cartel's height and Catalina herself. Catalina, Claude, Miguel, and a cartel member plan to rob the bank together. The job likely goes smoothly until Catalina turns her gun at her partners. She kills the cartel member first, then turns her gun to Claude, calling him small time. She then shoots Claude, leaving him for dead, and flees with the money, heading straight back to Miguel and the cartel. Claude survives this, and his quest for revenge would later dismantle everything Catalina built. This heist was likely the key stepping stone to Catalina's future empire. Robbing the bank itself would gain her a lot of respect within the cartel, and it gives her the perfect opportunity to rid herself of Claude. Now following this heist, Claude is then tried and convicted, so we likely don't see Catalina for at least 4 to 10 months. In this time, Catalina works her way to the top of the cartel's hierarchy. Using Miguel's name and authority, she tightens her control, and by the time Claude resurfaces, Miguel had already begun deferring to her, and Catalina was effectively running the cartel. Catalina's version of the cartel was louder, deadlier, and more ambitious than ever before. Under her rule, the cartel became a militarized force, flooding Liberty City with spank and enforcing dominance through fear. The cartel then maintained close surveillance on the Leone family. They gained leverage over the city's criminal networks. Informants like Curly Bob, addicted to spank, leaked critical information about Leone operations, thus helping Catalina consolidate control across the city. Catalina then ends the long-running feud with the Uptown Yardies by striking a business-first alliance with King Courtney, allowing the Yardies to sell spank across Staten Island in exchange for profit, weapons, and mutual protection. Catalina's cartel then forms a covert alliance with their citywide espresso to-go stalls. These coffee stands, disguised as harmless vendors, were actually key components of the cartel's drug network, spreading spank across all 3 islands of Liberty City. The cartel controls significant portions of Staten Island, Fort Staunton, and Pike Creek. Catalina's drive for total dominance even drew the organization into the deadly Yakuza war. Even though it was manipulated by Donald Love for his own gang, Catalina likely uses this to gain face. Her reign was built not on loyalty, but on terror. When Miguel was captured by Asuka Kaysen, Catalina silences him personally, killing both Miguel and Asuka in a violent display of power. She wanted the city to understand that loose lips will get you killed, and that any gang standing in her way will get decapitated. Catalina's leadership was absolute, but unsustainable. She ruled through fear and violence, not through structure or trust. To the outside world, she was a face of power, but to her subordinates, she was the embodiment of danger. After Miguel's death, Catalina becomes the sole ruler of the cartel, but her empire begins to crumble quickly. She wants confrontation with Claude, and it ends badly for her, where her helicopter is shot down in the flames. Her body then vanishes beneath the river, and with it, the last remnants of her control. The cartel then splinters soon after. Scattered cells continue to operate throughout the city, particularly in Fort Staunton and Pike Creek, but without Catalina or Miguel, there was no unifying power left. Ironically, after her fall, the cartel wielded heavier weapons than ever, Uzis and AK-47s, yet they lacked one thing that had kept them alive: direction. Now, a couple questions I've always really had about Catalina running a cartel is, how did she really ever get to that point? Now, Catalina likely used fear and respect, but mostly fear. She likely was feared for her ruthlessness and no-nonsense attitude toward the business, and was respected for it. In another way, Catalina saw Miguel as a way in and ran with it, becoming her lover behind Claude's back, and when she had enough pull with Miguel, she took care of Claude. And then the last one, she likely gained respect with the fears that she instilled in the cartel. And then, while Catalina was a somewhat decent leader, she really sparked the downfall of the cartel. She was way too reckless. I mean, openly inviting Claude to the mansion, and then really dipping as soon as things get somewhat out of hand, is what a poor leader does. And then she pried way too hard into the Leones with the Curly Bob ordeal, which leads Claude right to their spank manufacturing ship, where Salvatore learns of it and destroys it. And then she led mainly with fear rather than respect, which in a gang, it's good to be feared, but you gotta run it with respect, because if you don't have respect and just fear, you're not gonna get far. You're gonna get somewhere, but not far. The Colombian Cartel story is one of greed, manipulation, and ambition, a criminal dynasty built on the ashes of old empires and destroyed by its own hunger for power. From Cisco's disciplined leadership to Miguel's loyalty to Catalina's reign of terror, the cartel's journey through Liberty City remains one of the most complex and violent sagas of the 3D universe. Liberty City may have moved on, but the legend of the Colombian Cartel and the empire that once ruled it still lingers in the shadows. Alright guys, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed making this video. The Colombian Cartel has always kind of intrigued me in the 3D universe on like where they really came from and how the hell did Catalina go from being pretty much nobody who just ran heists and did jobs to running the cartel in like 1 year. That's always intrigued me and I've always kind of found that interesting. And I'm glad that I kind of have some answers now at this point. So yeah. But guys, before we leave, I want you guys to smash the like button, smash the subscribe button. It really helps your algorithm. And if you have any comments you want to leave below on like maybe more theories on the Colombian Cartel, what you guys think, how did Catalina really come to run the cartel? If you have any other theories, leave them in the comments below. I love talking to you guys about that stuff. And if you have any ideas for like a lore video, a game you want me to play, leave it in the comments below. I'll definitely check it out. And yeah, so anyways guys, I'll see you in the next one. Take care now. Bye.